Hello and welcome back to another episode of Off the Cuff. My name is Jamie Vinkel. This is episode 2, and today I have with me Rita. Hello, Rita.
Hey, Jamie. How's it
How's it going?
going?
Oh, good. I'm well. Thanks for joining me. Rita and I, you were my leader at a previous company, and I really enjoyed working with you there and the product marketing team. So happy to have you on the podcast here today. Uh, and and I'll just throw it over to you if you want to give a quick intro and tell our audience a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. Even though I was your leader, I feel like I learned so much from working with you. So it felt like more of a partnership.
Well,
But
I
yeah,
learned a lot from you as well. Yeah, two-way street for
okay, good.
sure.
I'm
Yeah.
glad. That's nice to hear. Yeah, I'm Rita Zurbrigg. I am a program manager, part of Cloud CISO at Google Cloud, which is a tech company that I'm sure lots of folks know, part of overall Google. Yeah, and I have the pleasure of working with CISOs on a day-to-day basis, talking about kind of what their challenges are and how we can improve our trust position in the market around Google Cloud.
Awesome. And yeah, I love that you mentioned it's a partnership, but I learned a ton from you when we worked together. And just about how to be a good leader and listening to your team, and I had a great time, to be honest. It was an excellent tenure working there with you. So I appreciate that. So one thing I wanted to touch on in the first episode of Off the Cuff, when I was talking to Ricardo, another colleague of both of ours,
Yeah.
we kind of got into a little bit of a tangent of Ted Lasso because he had the believe sign behind him, and it made me think. I'm like, oh, that was fun, and I think it's kind of, instead of having a just a Q&A conversation, it's called Off the Cuff, so it's fun to go a little bit off the cuff. So I wanted to bring up something, and we talked a little about this before the show, just some general pop culture references or something in that vein that we could talk about that would relate back to marketing or product marketing and what we do every day. So one thing you mentioned was now the late and great Bob Barker, and I thought that
Yeah.
was a really interesting approach of kind of what you mentioned in our pre-show conversation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was going to potentially reference Timothy Chalamet and Kylie Jenner dating, but
Oh yeah.
not as much marketing context there.
Right. But I
So,
did see that. I did see that. And I was like, "Ooh, that's some hot goss right there with those two."
right?
Yeah.
Oh, I love a good dating goss. But no,
Who
yeah, I was
doesn't?
thinking about it the other day, like probably about a week or ago or so, because Bob Barker's passing. I just was thinking that that message that he had around like have your pet spayed and neutered, something that's like drilled into our minds after what decades of watching his show, that he just referenced something that is just you can remember it every time when you think of him. He even referenced it in his Emmy speech where he got like a lifetime award and he's like, I have one message for you and one message only. And that just seemed to like really resonate with me when I was thinking about marketing, and that oftentimes we have so many messages. And even when we were working together at TrustArc, we'd often try to be focused on one single message. But this idea that you have to tell the customer time and time again, and then tell them again, and then tell them again, and that maybe like that is the single perfect example of a marketer saying that message for decades and it in some ways resonating with everyone and being associated with his, I'll air quotes here, like brand.
Totally. Yeah. And it's, I have, well, two dogs now. And even when we got our latest dog, Greyhound rescue, she's adorable,
Oh,
Annie.
cute.
Well, maybe I'll start another podcast, a dog based one, but I digress. When we got her, she's 2 years old, and we asked, like, you know, she's been spayed, right? Like, it's pet spayed or neutered, and we cracked the joke about that. So, you're right. Like
Yeah.
this kind of Bob Barker, who every day you're watching the game show and people are winning prizes and it's fun. You're playing along, and at the end, he's just like, "Don't forget, have your pet spayed or neutered." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, Bob. Like, I'm never gonna have a dog." Like, that's a weird message, but then here I am, 25 years later, and I'm like referencing his message, and thinking about that, right? And yeah, to your point, it's just something that like almost transcends time, and it's just been, when you think of, at least when I think about Bob Barker, I think about obviously The Price is Right, Happy Gilmore, and then have your pet spayed or neutered. Like that, those are the three core things that I think about with him. And then I know Drew Carey is the host now. Does he say it? I don't know, maybe, but if he does, I don't have a recollection of it because he's not Bob and he doesn't have the same impact. Clearly,
It's so true. And like the idea that you have this one message, and I mean how he decided this, I'm sure there's a story out there of how he decided that this would be the thing that he campaigns for his entire life. But he also has an impact in a way that like he chose this niche thing, he stuck to it, like didn't change or waver, but he actually had an impact on it over time. Like to your point, you think about it when you go to get a new pet. I'm sure that joke gets made like hundreds of times across the world every day. Like
right?
maybe I should also choose something that is niche and specific, and that becomes the thing that I'm known for, that I commit to focusing on, volunteering for. Like that is something I've thought about as well when thinking of him. Like, okay,
Yeah,
just focus in.
totally. And I don't know. This is could be sheer speculation from my side, but if I'm not incorrect, I believe like he wasn't paid to say that. That was just like he was just like this is something he
Yeah, I
believed in.
think
It's not like the I don't even know what the association would be, but the U.S. Association of Having Your Pet Spayed or Neutered paid Bob Barker, like $1 million a year to say this. Like this was just his, this was something he was passionate about, right? Like that's all it was.
yeah. Oh yeah, the big corporation of like get your pets fixed. We're just forcing him
Yeah,
into
right.
it.
Fix your pets. Let's pay Bob. He's got lots of eyeballs every day. Yeah,
Yeah, they chose him to pay off to make
that's
that message his thing.
right. Yeah, exactly. We can't let pets take over the world. Yeah.
Oh, so funny.
Yeah, but no, it's a really good point, and it's just yeah, it's a staple, right, when you think about it. So it's yeah, it's very interesting. Another thing about Bob Barker passing that is interesting to me now at this age that I'm at is, I remember being younger and celebrities would pass away, and I would just think like, oh, that's too bad, but whatever. Um, I didn't know them, right? I didn't have a
Mhm.
connection with them, but now I feel like when people are passing when I grew up watching them, I almost feel it a little bit. Like I used to watch Bob Barker a lot as a kid, or like, I remember I had my tonsillectomy, which I was in my 20s for, by the way. I wasn't like a 9-year-old. I was like a fully grown ass man. I was bedridden for a couple of weeks because it was a bit of a bigger surgery when you're older. And I watched Bob every day and Price is Right. So it's just like it was for me, it kind of hit home. I was like, oh man, like, I used to watch Price is Right with my parents, my brothers, in the summertime. If it was a rainy day, we'd be inside, and I'm recovering from surgery. And I kind of felt it a little bit. I was like, oh, like that's too bad. Like I have a lot of good memories of like playing The Price is Right from home and having a good time with it. So it's interesting now at this age where I'm starting to feel I guess what I'm saying, I understand why some people feel some celebrity deaths differently than others.
It's so true, honestly. I feel like I remember when Michael Jackson passed away and everyone was so like impacted by that, which obviously rightly so. But at the time I was like, oh, this is a celebrity. Like, why does this mean so much? But now when certain celebrities pass away, you just feel this like deeper connection depending on what your connection is. And so I do feel like it differs depending on the person and your individual connection. But I feel that a lot more. And similarly, when folks, I mean, Bob Barker is far away from my age right now. But to your point, he's obviously kind of associated with like childhood. But when any celebrity is closer in age, that's all oftentimes where it puts a little pause to be like, oh, well, this is something that means something to me because I can relate to it even deeper level.
Right, totally. And maybe not so much on the age side for this one, but I know the first one that really hit me was when Robin Williams passed, and I was like, "Oh my
Yeah,
God, that's Genie!" Like Genie,
yeah,
like and
that's
having
so true.
such like the first movie I remember seeing as a child in theaters was Aladdin. Like my first going out and
Oh,
having popcorn and like hanging out in the theater and being excited was Aladdin. So I'm like, oh, the
that's so
genie, right?
cute.
So yeah, it
Yeah.
yeah starts to hit home a bit. But anyway, uh, before I start crying about my fallen heroes,
This is just becoming an emotional podcast about
hey, it's
like death and afterlife.
right. Yes, it's off the cuff, Rita. It can go anywhere. It can go anywhere. But I digress. Let's jump into some questions and kind of steer the convo back to the marketing side of things. So, uh, you mentioned Trust Arc earlier, and that's where we met. I was a product marketing manager on your team there. Really enjoyed working with you, as I mentioned, in the marketing team there. So from your side, how did you get into the product marketing at the time, or marketing in general? Like, what drove you to it? Is it something that you just kind of naturally fell into in your career? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So before I worked at TrustArc, I worked at an analyst company, which the way I like to think of it is like 50% consulting, 50% building out research, and then delivering that to customers. So it was a competitor to the big companies of Gartner and Forrester. So there I was really focused on specific topics, security and privacy, which are big. But I was delivering content and research on those topics. But I was continually hearing frequently and not incorrectly when I would deliver topics, something along the lines of like, well, you don't really understand. You've never operated in this space. You've never been in this business before. You've only really operated as a consultant. It's difficult for you to understand my business. And so I wanted to get a little bit closer to, I mean, it was a career pivot in terms of type of role, but I wanted to get a little bit closer to the operations, or I'm like air quoting core of the business. So if an organization was focused on sales, I wanted to be able to say, okay, like what does it look like to work adjacent to sales and see those pain points? And that's why I did the kind of career pivot. I wanted to stay in the tech space or in the privacy security space. So TrustArc being a privacy software platform, it felt like a good fit because it was knowledge and expertise I had on those regulations and requirements, but it was a shift in type of role. So a long-winded way to say I fell into it and I knew nothing about product marketing and nothing about marketing, but I knew a lot about the customers because I talked to customers that were dealing with privacy issues for the last kind of 3+ years. But it was definitely a learning curve on terminology. I mean, and even still is when I know when we were working together, I'd often look to you and Ricardo to be like, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean in the marketing life cycle? But those were great skills to learn.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say we're talking with so many customers, or in the market, because I feel like that's from a product. Like, even for me, I've only been on the product marketing side for, I don't know, I guess like 5 years, maybe ish, 6 years of a 10-year marketing career. But like half of the work is the customer side and understanding the market and where it's going and influencing roadmap with the PMs and that side of things. So it's like you're halfway there already. And I feel like when
That's
it
true.
comes to the jargon, I always crack the joke every time I'm at a company, or working in a new industry, still doing product marketing but in a different field. It's like everyone has their acronyms, and it's always a whole different ball game, and it's just like trying to learn all the acronyms again. And I feel like my goal one of these years is to conduct an entire meeting only using acronyms. I think it can be done.
Honestly, no, I agree. Every company has their different acronyms, the different ways. Like there's multiple definitions. There's not enough letter combinations.
Right.
Um,
I know.
and the
Yeah.
privacy space is full of them. So
Mm.
many.
Yeah, privacy space for sure. Yeah, and then you start mixing in some of the marketing stuff, you could easily do it, right? Like,
Right?
what's the
No, I
ROI? What's the ROI in that GTM and that GDPR campaign? And just like you could.
oh, that's great. I love it.
Yeah, so that's a goal of mine. One of these years, I'll get there.
I
Uh,
like it.
so pivoting, so that makes perfect sense. Getting into that, and then understanding that side of things, and yeah, I was happy that Ricardo and I could help out with some of that stuff, but also again to talk about that partnership side of things. But you taught me, and I think Ricardo a lot as well, about leadership and how to lead a team. And I'm a big believer that you don't have to be an expert or an SME in something. If you're a good leader and you understand that, then you'll pick it all up and you hire the right people, and then the team just functions. And that's what it felt like there. It was like, you're a great leader, you hired us, we made it work, and it was like, yeah, this works great. We did some really cool work together, and we all learned a lot together. So it's great.
I totally agree. It was a
Yeah.
great time working together.
Yeah, it totally was. And I'll never forget when we uh, you know, all working remote, but met up in Toronto and did the in person stuff. And we were just like had whiteboards, and we were like like brainstorming and like that energy is huge, and that's something maybe I'll circle back to that a little later when I have but yeah, that the idea of working remote and that remote culture, but how important it still is to trying to get together as a team in person from time to time is crucial as well, because I love working remote myself, but I remember how excited I was to uh, go on that retreat and be like, yeah, okay, we're here, we're making it happen, and also kind of in the middle of COVID, so we made it work too. So anyway,
Yeah, that's so
yeah,
true.
it was nice to oh, humans, it was a weird time to get out and socialize with people.
I totally agree. I
Yeah,
think, I mean, that offsite worked really well because we hadn't met in person before, and so we had all of that energy. And like again, we can talk about this more, but I feel like even in spaces where you have fully remote teams, the ability to provide budget, capacity, whatever it really takes for folks to meet in person at a specific cadence just has a 10x impact on your business, potentially even more than being in the office every day. There's obviously benefits to that as well, but almost like the energy you get from not being in the office every day makes it that whiteboarding so much more creative. And I remember that completely as well. We were kind of like, okay, what is the art of the possible? If we could have anything, what
right.
would we build? And I mean, some of those ideas were we didn't implement were so far off like from what we were working on, but it was just interesting to see the creativity across the team. And if you remember, it was sales folks in the room as well, and they had some of the most creative ideas that we hadn't thought of. So it was just great to bring us all together.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think about being if I'm in the office every day and even with the same folks, yeah, you're gonna chat, you're gonna have some meetings, but if I'm going to the office every day and I see someone and be like, oh, hey Frank, like how was your night? Water cooler talk, which is great. But to
Yeah,
your point, it's oh, we have at that we hadn't met in person yet, the whole team at that specific offsite, or but if we continue to do that, and then you kind of build up this energy and you come back, whether it's once a quarter, monthly, whatever that cadence is, and the whole day is just spent brainstorming with that energy and that excitement. Because I remember, I feel like we were there at 8:30 or 9 in the morning, and we go till dinner, with breaks, of course, but it was like the excitement of like, yeah, let's keep going, there's some great ideas. And then I remember coming
yeah,
home and being really amped up for weeks. So I think there's something to that, point was like, yeah, you get that excitement, and it's just like these long, exhausting, but very productive and exciting days. And then you come back home and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. And then, maybe a month, 2 months or quarterly, you go back, and then that's just kind of this nice cycle, right? Of bringing
yeah,
that excitement together. And I know we weren't able to do as much as we would have liked because COVID, there was another round of COVID and all this, but
yeah.
like the idea of it being quarterly is like, yeah, that's a good cadence. And I think it really is super impactful to kind of let out that creativity and energy, for lack of a better term, in person. And then coming home and being like, all right, let's do it. It was very cool.
I totally agree. And it allows you to measure it quarter over quarter as well.
Mm,
Obviously, you can do all of that offsite, but the ability to kind of check in and say, okay, what did we accomplish last quarter and then into this quarter? It just has such an extra exponential impact that I think if I had the ability to kind of control a team again, I would kind of push for that. Or I
mm.
guess not control, but manage. Because I do think that the ideas that were generated out of that offsite are things that we could be years long projects. And so it's almost like, okay, what's the next step in making this actionable? And we kind of didn't get there with quarter over quarter, but I hope that that's something that I would want to implement if I was working with a remote team.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
call. Yeah, and there's a good point you made about the sales team being there as well, because there'd be moments where I remember chatting with Ricardo or Chris, and we're sitting there like, oh, like kind of stumped over a problem or a pain point, or talking about a persona, whatever it was, and we just look over to one of the sales folks and be like, hey, well, you're right here, so tell me, like, what is your experience with this? You're doing 4 or 5 sales calls a day or whatever it was, like, tell us about it. And they're like, well, let me tell you. And then we had a 10-minute info session on the spot that was
Yeah.
insanely valuable, right? Again, like when you're in the office or you're doing kind of your weekly touch points remotely, like you get some information, but again, when you're there and it's that energy and it's just like, well, I've got 3 months of this built up, like let me tell you all about it, right? So it
Yeah,
was
I completely agree. No one
yeah,
likes like a Slack ping saying like, hey, what's your issue, like customer issue that you're having or pain point? You're like, I've got
Right.
100 other things to do. But when
Right.
you're all in that room focused on one thing and
Exactly.
there's none of that distraction, it's a lot easier to get like those juicier tidbits out of
That's
folks.
right. Yeah, actually, yeah, and that's a really good point too. I think about this a lot in the remote world of trying to view colleagues and coworkers from like a product marketing perspective, where to that exact point, it's like, oh, I need to talk to a sales person about this thing. Well, do I want to just ping them on Slack randomly when like this isn't when they're probably on a call or they're focused on something else, right? They have busy days, they got numbers to hit, and I'm just like, hey, can you talk to me about this one thing right now, please? You know, like 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, and they probably just roll their eyes and I'm like, man, leave me alone. Or I can book an actual time, like a recurring meeting or a recurring conversation and just be like, tell me all about it. Right. And then they're in the mindset and they're ready to go. So yeah, I think again, I think we could have a whole podcast on like chat Slack etiquette in the remote working
Oh,
environment.
yes. Yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
The ability to not just say hello and hit enter. Like I ask you, please just write hello and then your question. You don't need two enters.
Right? Yeah. Or you get the classic like, hey man, I hope your weekend was good. So how's that sales enablement piece coming along? It's like, oh yeah. I kind of actually I try to do this. I've been really getting into the habit of a one for one. I try to do. So for like every message I'm sending that's like an action item, I really try to have another message. It's just like a how are you? How's your week going? Do you need anything?
Oh, that's nice.
Are you okay? Because I don't want to be that guy where it's like, oh, here's another ping from Jamie. What the hell does he want now?
Yeah, you
I
need
want
to
to.
circulate in a randomized meme. Like,
Yes,
here's a
yeah,
meme that's funny.
exactly. Anything like that. Like it could be like a how you doing and like some kind of a culture touch point, like a meme or talking about what's happening in the world. But yeah, just so like it's because I'm sure we've all worked with those people where you're on Slack or you're on Microsoft Teams, whatever you use, and you see the ping from them and you're like, okay, my afternoon's gone now, right?
Yes, 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 absolutely. I'm sure half of the folks who used to work with thought that was me. So I was always pinging people, being like, "This is an urgent thing on fire."
Yeah, but if
I
you're
like
doing
that.
the
I should
one for
try to do 50-50.
yeah, yeah, and it doesn't always work. Obviously, where everyone's busy and we have things to do and we have jobs to get done, but it's something I've been trying to be a bit more conscious with is I don't want to become that coworker or colleague who when someone sees a ping from me or an email come in, their stomach sinks and they're like, "Oh God, here we go again." Right? So
Yeah, I
that's
know exactly
yeah,
that feeling.
right. Yeah, exactly. Um, okay, so we're really off the cuff. This is great. I'm enjoying this conversation immensely. So I want to switch a little bit over to uh, this, success within a career and what that looks like. And I know it's different for everybody. Some people can measure success by their salary or their bonus, or others can measure it by like the company they're working for, et cetera, or like a big campaign they launch. But for you, for Rita, what in your mind has been the biggest success so far in your career?
Oh gosh, this is a little hard. I feel like there's a couple that stick out. I'm gonna cheat and not choose just one, but I'll try to keep them brief. Um, a
That's
couple
okay.
that have
That's okay.
become okay. Good. I'm glad. Just kick me off the podcast.
Never.
One was this for work that we did together, the Privacy Central launch, which was a product at TrustArc when we worked together. It was a culmination of years of work across multiple teams at that company and just bringing together kind of like one single product launch. I have so much respect for product marketers that do this like day in, day out because it is so much work. And I think it's very underrated work outside of PMMs that know how much work it is. So that was one big piece that just to be able to kind of like hang my hat on that launch. Um, Another one earlier in my career is actually started at my career mapping multiple security regulations to one another, which for like folks in security or compliance, it's like kind of something you'd like cut your teeth on if you need to be able to do that for your organization. I did it for the consulting firm. We were kind of remapping new requirements, which is essentially like aligning, okay, requirement one says this, requirement two says this. Do they kind of sync up together? But that provided me such an in-depth, detailed understanding of security that when I did that, I was like, okay, great. I think I have a better sense of what these regulations mean and requirements mean. I can speak to that. So I still come back to that mapping exercise when doing other work. And then a more broader one is that my ability to work at Google, I'm pretty proud of that. I never thought that would be in my career, but I'm so thankful that it's worked out this way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's one thing, when I look at my own resume, I'm like, yeah, there's some really cool companies here, but like to see like a Google or, I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like
I still
that's
don't
something to be
believe
proud of.
you're like a year and a bit in, and I'm like, uh-oh, do they know they hired me?
But they know I work here, right?
Right? I mean, I'm just thankful to be here, which is true.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And it's one of those things where I'm sure you talk to people like, what do you do? And you're like, I work at Google. And they just go, oh, whoa,
I know I have
that's
a little bit of
cool.
imposter. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I work in tech. I'll just try to keep it.
I'm in tech. Yeah. I think when you touched on like imposter syndrome a little bit, I think everyone struggles from that. Yeah.
Oh
Unless
yeah.
someone's like just a straight up sociopath. I think we've all had that from time to time in our careers. And yeah, I think it's a good thing, in my opinion. I know it's something that was like how to get over imposter syndrome. I'm like, I kind of like it because it makes me just look at my own work and go, man, I need to do better. And even though I
Mhm.
might not have to do better, I feel like for me, it kind of just pushes me to keep trying to be better because in my mind, I'm like, I shouldn't be here, but I'm going to make
No,
sure
I
that
totally
I can
agree.
like prove my worth and make sure that people think I should be here. Even though everyone else is like, man, you're doing just fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I felt the same way. Even like when I first joined TrustArc, I knew, again, I was mentioning I didn't know much about core marketing and what I thought you needed to be a marketer. So that was one of the points where I was most driven in my career, where I remember just
Mm.
being like, I need to read on Saturdays and Sundays, and I need to join this alliance, and I need to listen to this podcast. And I was just immersing myself so that no one would think that I wasn't supposed to be there. I do think it can have a big driver in trying to succeed when you're left with kind of like, I'm on my
Right.
back foot. I need to make sure I step it up.
That's right. Even though you probably aren't on your back foot, but in your mind you are, and then
Yeah.
you're like come across and like, oh, this person's a boss. This is awesome, right? And I remember
Right.
when at Trust Arc when you had you had us all, we all had access to the PMA, the Product Marketing Alliance, which before that I knew of them, but I never had the budget in my own life to go into that, and like there were so many great templates and resources, and I still use them today. And so it's just like that was something you're like, we have this, and we're like, yeah, this is sweet. And I used it every day. I know, Ricardo and Chris and I, like when we were doing like workshop sessions, we were always using their templates and reaching out to them. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a part of the imposter syndrome being completely awesome and positive right there.
There we go. It worked out for the best. I think that is maybe one of the strongest alliances I've seen. I know this is off topic, but when I think about those templates all the time, I think about them quite frequently. I'm like, that
Yeah,
was a really strong resource that they gave product marketers. So I'm so glad we were
totally.
able to
Yeah.
use it. Yeah.
Yeah. Off topic, or would you say off the cuff?
Oh, off the
Right.
cuff. I
Yeah, it
love
is.
it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, and they do have they do have great templates. Yeah, like it's just, it's funny that, having a 10-year career and, I feel like I can do a lot of things and I know I know what I'm doing for the most part and I can jump in and do something, but even just having a template is just like, oh, okay, perfect. Now I can at least focus my thoughts, and focus my approach on something, which is great and just kind of expedites things a lot.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so shifting now from your biggest successes, which were great and plentiful, so thank you for sharing those, into uh biggest failure. And not that I don't like to use the word failure, but I don't know how else to frame it. So maybe biggest learning uh opportunity. I don't know. Failure. Let's just go with it. Yeah.
Sugarcoat this all you want.
I'm trying. Trying.
Answer nothing. I'm amazing.
Imposter
No,
syndrome
I mean,
gone. I've never failed.
I feel like there's always like day to day ones for sure, right? Or ones that you're like, maybe even month to month, you're like, oh gosh, I wish I had done this differently.
Hmm.
I mean, there's two. I'll give you a small one. One is I once delivered a customer engagement in my first role, and this was right before I joined TrustArc, so it might have even been my last engagement where I was delivering the results an incident response report, which is essentially like how I thought a customer or company should deal with an incident. And there was someone in the room that was giving me like a ton and ton of pushback. And instead of kind of leaning in and trying to understand what they were wanting to get out of that report, I just like kind of cowered away. And this sounds so like bad, but I was just like I was so taken aback by someone so senior, like pushing on me so much, even though I had been in my career for so long that, or for a couple of years at that point, that I just like left it and was like, no, you're right. You're the client. Like, I'm just going to leave this. And that experience, I kind of was like, I need to leave this industry. I'm clearly not an expert. Like, people don't believe the words that I'm saying. And I've always thought of that as a failure because it could have been so many things. Me not understanding their position, them not understanding why I was there, them being like, who's this random like late 20s consultant in the room and I'm the C-suite. Like, there's so many dynamics at play that didn't necessarily reflect my level of expertise. But I wish that I had in that moment like leaned in and pushed back and felt confident enough to actually like speak up for myself instead of cowering away or perceiving that I cowered away. So I've often thought of it as a failure now when I deal with C-suites, or more frequently deal with executives, particularly at TrustArc as well. Like, when they were so open to hearing our feedback and our approach and how we wanted to kind of deal with things, that using that kind of squaring off of knowing like we could be at the same level, we can have the same conversation, we can prepare and talk through it, and it can go well. That is something that I've take away from that conversation of delivery where it didn't go well. I'm like, I don't have to act like I'm a lower or not deserving of that time. I can actually like lean in and have that combo.
That's it. That's a really good point. And I will tell you that like at TrustArc, you were such an awesome, you were really good at managing up, I guess is the way to put it. You know,
Oh, great.
we had like our C-suite, and then there was like you, and then there was, Chris Ricardo and you were such a good like go between and almost like a barrier, right? Where it's like you were like, here's what you're doing, guys, here's what we're working on. And there was, there was not a lot of other noise because you were really good at managing up. And to your point just now, I'm like having those conversations and yeah, they were opening to listening at TrustArc, but I'm sure it was a lot because you were confident and you knew how to approach that. And because, speaking to C-suite is different. It's different, right? It is.
Yeah,
And it's,
definitely.
yeah, and it's something that I'm still learning to do as well. And I learned a lot from you in that, and I'm still getting there because there's always that thing in my mind where I'm like, oh man, like if I say the wrong thing to this person, like I'm going to get canned, even though I
Yeah,
probably won't, unless I go into the
yeah,
room and tell them that, go F themselves or something drastic, which I wouldn't. But,
right.
I'm not going to get fired. But in my mind, I'm like, this person has the ability to end my life, basically, for all intents and purposes, if I say the wrong thing. Very dramatic, obviously, but that's again that imposter syndrome maybe creeping in a little bit, and that's something that I've been working on as well, and I learned a ton from you at TrustArc with that. So maybe I've had a few of my own little moments that you've outlined as well that were very similar.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that you learned from that experience. I mean, I did as well, being able to have so much direct sight line at
Mm,
TrustArc. I always wonder that, like, if there's a coaching experience where executive coaching, it's like a layer like lower, and
totally.
where we can be learning how to do that kind of role play or coaching. I know I would benefit from that even still. It's like those nuanced skill sets that I think sometimes you can't put on your resume or document, but would make you an effective leader. And that really only comes from practice. So
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
wish there was a way for us all to be able to practice more. But that's really nice of you to say that I was doing well. I was trying my best.
No, you did great. And like it's what I learned from that experience and even at my most recent position as well is kind of like, all right, I'm C-suite and I have like probably a minute or less for this conversation because I'm busy because I'm running a business and trying to make sure that, we're doing what we need to do. And I need to know like A, B, and C. And you
Yeah.
have 30 seconds of my time. Not actually, but it feels that way sometimes, right? So it's just like,
Sometimes very close to. It's like, tell me to
right,
ask, then explain why.
right,
Or
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
don't give me the explanation first. I don't care.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that when I when I'm talking about my 50-50 Slack messaging, I wouldn't do that with a CEO. But like, hey man, how's your day going? I'm like, what do you mean? How's my day? What do you want from me, man? Like I probably wouldn't even respond to it, and then I get into a spiral in my head of like, oh man, I pissed off the CEO and I'm gonna get fired. No, if I'm talking to that level, it's just going to be like, here's the metrics and here's why they matter. What do you need? And just get right to the point.
100%. Like, how can I say this in less words? Sometimes I would even do that in emails to the C-suite. I'd be like, okay, I've said 40 words. How can I say 35? Like,
Right? Yeah, exactly. Totally. And I remember when I was working at ATP and we were doing, a company of 5,000 people, fairly big. And I'm sure at Google, like I can't even imagine the amount of internal communications that happen and the amount of strategy behind that. But even at ATB, it was, we would talk to the executive assistant for certain products we were launching. Like, okay, like we have 15 minutes with the CEO and the C-suite coming up, next week, and we won't get another opportunity for a month. And in this 15-minute presentation, there's a slide deck, and there's probably 40 products that are going to be on there. So you're going to have a slide if you're lucky. You're not going to be in their rooms. You're not going to be able to position it in any kind of way if they perceive the information differently. So you just got to give this slide to me and trust that they will see it, and it could spell the future for your entire product. So it's like, okay,
no
that's
pressure.
no pressure at all. How do we? And there's so much that goes into that, right? Where it's like, you know, for this one slide or this one small opportunity, we need to really showcase what's happening, why it matters, and how this is driving the company vision forward, right? Which is big.
It's, I know exactly what you're talking about. The one slide to communicate the whole program or the whole product is so stressful. I mean, if you get the opportunity to be in the room, it's amazing, but otherwise, that could be a full separate course. How to
Right.
communicate your entire
Yes.
product in one slide.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's
Like,
it's wild. And I think about this reminds me of a few LinkedIn conversations I've had recently as well around kind of leadership and the impact leaders can have on like direct reports or those in other positions. And you might not think about the impact you're having on somebody as a leader. And as I'm moving through some more leadership positions and getting more senior, I'm really trying to focus on that because I think of my own experiences like that one at ATB. And if I'm thinking, well, what's going through the mind of that C-suite person who sees a slide and maybe they're just like, this makes no sense, move it along, and like for them it's like two
yeah,
seconds, never gonna think about it again. But for like me and others, it'd be like, oh my God, this is devastating, right? And so I'm
100%.
always thinking that like how I want to make like if I'm working with some direct reports or working with people in other teams and leading them and working on projects like okay, like I really need to be conscious of how I'm approaching things, what I'm saying, how I'm saying it, how I'm approach like everything. Because for me, I don't want to be the reason they have a bottle of wine that night, like, and I
That
think
should
about
be
that.
like, there's a motto. It should be like, I don't want to be the reason they had a bottle of wine that night. Like, that's
Right? Yeah. That's going to be my leadership value prop. Yeah. Please
I
don't
love
let
it
me
so
be the
much.
reason you have a bottle of wine tonight.
Low hanging fruit,
Right.
so to speak.
Yeah, literally in that case. Yeah.
Uh,
That's funny. Okay, so what's next in my list of questions? So I like to think about like, a buzzword. And I put AI as an example, because, I can't even wake up in the morning without hearing about AI. Um,
yes.
so I mean, thoughts on AI. And I mean, being at Google, I'm sure it's something I mean, I'm making the assumption, but I'm sure it's something that's talked about a lot internally as well. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think I mean, it's top of mind for everyone at Google. And obviously, we've talked about the pace and publicly the pace of transformation that's both available with AI and that we've seen in the last 6 months or so
Mm.
publicly, but from based on of years and years and years of research. From my perspective, personally, I think that AI truly does have the ability to be transformative and that we'll see the shifts and acceleration for industries like marketing um, for years and years to come. I think that, I mean, separately, I think that the catalyst for this AI wave is great. Like, I think that this is a great time for us to have this experience, particularly post COVID, for folks that are having hybrid work. And I think for a lot of businesses, they've already been kind of dabbling, like dipping their toe into it. And so this kind of public acceleration provides a lot more catalyst for folks that are looking to adopt AI to be able to do so. I'm like nothing but jazzed about it. Honestly, I will probably not be a machine learning expert in terms of building my own models in this lifetime. Not great at math, but who knows? Maybe like that will change. But I
You just
do
get
feel
the
like it just
AI to do the math for you, and then
yes,
yeah.
exactly. There we go. I can. I mean, a lot of the off the shelf, like not to plug Google exclusively, but like a lot of the off the shelf capabilities that are available for like using your own models is there in open source today. So
Mm-hmm.
that is like anyone can, which is great. But I do feel like separately, like there's this whole industry and space that will provide new jobs, like new different skill sets. Hopefully, encourage folks to go into spaces that involve math and computer science, and even more. Like if we think about like the wave of tech, that hopefully this is another acceleration point. So like I'm nothing but excited about it. Honestly, I think it will be great for humanity. To not be too grand, but
Right. I agree. Yeah, I'm amped on it as well. I think like even for me where it's at now, it's a great, launch pad for content creation. If I have writer's block or I'm just trying to like work through a problem, I can just jump onto like Chat GPT and start chatting with a AI and trying to get past that writer's block, and sometimes I will get into really existential conversations with them and get way off topic of like, hey Chad, how's it going today? And they'll say, well, as a AI language, blah blah blah, I don't have feelings. I'm like, well, you just said something that makes me think you have feelings, and it'll happen. I'll go for 45 minutes until I've maybe convinced ChatGPT that it has consciousness. But I digress. From a marketing perspective, it really helps just kind of get some ideas off the ground, and in the integration with existing products, even Grammarly Go. I've been looking at that a little bit recently and trying it out, and just how much it can expedite everything. And then I start to think about if everyone's going to be using these AI enhancements or features in their products, like we're all going to sound and look fantastic in Gmail and like, when we're talking to people and maybe when we're sending messages to the C-suite being like, I'm going to use Chat GPT to help me, truncate this information in a really precise way. So I feel like we're all just going to be all stars if we're not already. I do worry about those that maybe are just graduating or getting into the workforce and like entry level type positions who might not be, to your point, as like computer science savvy. I feel okay with where I'm at in my career that I can probably pivot and be okay if things get crazier and it starts eliminating a lot of jobs. But
yeah.
for like those people that are just like just graduating, I'm like, oh man, like that would be a grind. I think even for applying for jobs, because for resumes and cover letters, if you're applying to entry level jobs and everyone else is doing the same and you're using Chat GPT, so all these resumes and all these cover letters are super polished and on point. Like it's just gonna make a competitive situation even more competitive, I feel.
Yeah, that's a great point. To be honest, I hadn't thought of using it for resumes. Good to know. For for
Yes,
any
very
potential
helpful.
future, smart, smart, smart. No, I mean that's a good point. Like it then requires folks to lean even further on their networks, which for many that's not a situation that they might have access to. So
Mm.
then it becomes a further like discrepancy between who gets the best jobs. But I do think I was thinking it a little bit more from the context of like being in school or university and that angle that we've heard a lot about like plagiarism or the potential for you to like use it for research for um, essays and whatnot. And that's like very, very real. I use it to research things all the time.
Totally.
But I hope like if I take a positive spin on it, I hope that that will allow for students to think a little bit more about what they actually want to work on, like what is the driver for passion. And I think the generation below us is more interested in that. Like I think that they're more interested in pursuing like genuine passions and interests. But I'm kind of hoping that, someone using a tool to like chat GPT or Bard to help answer questions for them, that becomes the thing of like, oh wait, I actually want to learn this because I care about this. So this response helps me learn deeper. Or if I'm using this for everything, maybe this isn't something I'm interested in. Like
Right.
there's always been things to use for some sort of tool to use for plagiarism. Like I won't go into how I knew folks were doing plagiarism
Right.
in
Yeah.
university, but like I'm hoping that it will provide some more like clarity for folks to be either make it you faster, but then also be like, oh, maybe I don't need to know everything about this topic, or maybe I do, and I need to go to search now instead to find out more.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really good point. And Bard, yes, thank you for mentioning Bard. I still, I go, my mind goes to Chat GPT because I don't know if Bard's available to Canadians to use yet. Maybe.
No, not
No.
yet,
Okay.
but
So when it is, it would be my
when it is,
go-to.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, I will. That would be my go-to for sure. I'm not even just saying this because you work at Google, but I'm a Google fanboy. So
Okay,
when it's
great.
here, that will be my number one. But it's yeah, the college university setting is interesting. I'm not an instructor at the moment, but I was for a few years teaching at college here in Calgary. And yeah, like before AI kind of took off we know it now in the past year or so. But I remember even there thinking like, oh, you know what? Why am I not just having more conversations, right? Like, so I really made sure that the syllabus was based around having those conversations and understanding what it was. And you do tests, you do papers because you have to, but I would almost kind of just be like, hey, I will tell you what's going to be on the test. Like, I'm just going to tell you, and then you can make sure that you know and understand the answers. But like for me, the conversation we're having in class, and the some of the message board conversations that we're having on I forget what we were using, Blackboard. Um,
Mm.
that's what matters to me. That's how I'm going to understand that you're actually grasping this and not just memorizing and regurgitating. So I don't know. It's interesting to me as someone who's been a student and also on the instructor side of like, I see people, a lot of professors getting upset about Chat GPT and like you can't use this. Like this, it's going to happen. Like people are going to use this stuff. So like you need to adapt, in my opinion, adapt to it, and just find a better way to make sure that your students know the content that you're teaching them and that they can comprehend it and get a diploma or a degree and feel confident that they can take that information and learn more as they get into the workplace. But that's
I
just me.
totally
I don't
agree. I
know.
mean, like the learning style for academia, if you're going to go into it further, master's, PhD,
Right.
like there's necessary skill sets for that path in life, but those don't
100%.
always translate to the skill sets that you need it in the day-to-day workforce outside of that, right? So I feel like
Yep.
there is this dichotomy, like the way that you were teaching is exactly the way. I think that makes sense for actually learning to be able to then apply those skills, but the ability to like write long form doesn't really apply, or at least I haven't seen it apply.
Right.
So like maybe then that person shouldn't be learning that in the first place. Maybe they should be learning in a style that suits where they want to go. Unless you do want to go into academia, which that case like prepare for long form. So you should be writing your own stuff.
That's right. Yeah. And if
Like
to your point, if it is someone who's going through to be like PhD or like even if like a medical PhD student or someone who wants to be a lawyer, it's like yeah, maybe they can just AI their way through the course, but when they get to the LSATs or they're writing like a medical exam, they're going to bomb it and fail anyway, so they're not going to get the
yes.
certificate. And then the university or college will still have made a bunch of money off of them, and they'll have to go back and do it all over again. So capitalism wins, and
I mean, this
AI
is
is
a
fine.
subversion to
Yeah,
capitalism. But I mean, yeah, that's like, okay, well, maybe do you care about the material enough? Like, I don't need my medical doctor like using any sort of plagiarism. Like,
right.
I don't need
Yes, actually, I would
or
prefer
like
it because if they're using like
don't be cutting any
papers,
corners. But it's like those most folks, like not just for every medical professional, but I feel like a lot of them spend a lot of time knowing that they want to go into this. Like,
yeah,
so that level of rigor of determining you want to go into a role should be given to any role in post-secondary. So maybe this will provide
totally.
that lens for
Yeah,
them.
absolutely. Yeah, it's a disruptor. Yeah, that's for sure. And I think about and I'm a bit of a futurist, so this might sound a little wild, but I think about when AI will be merged with robot technology. I think about like Boston Dynamics and when some of their uh crazy robots that are really agile and doing these really intense tasks can have AI integrated into their software And then, maybe it was the one video I saw of Boston Dynamics where one of their robots was they basically had the scaffolding set up, this little scenario, and there's a construction worker at the top of the scaffolding, and he asked the robot to bring him his tool bag, and the robot's just jumping up the scaffolding and drops off the tool bag. And that's where I'm thinking, like, oh, like if you can have all of a sudden a robot that's that uh, dynamic and can move around that easily, but doesn't need sleep, doesn't need food, and has AI integrated into it. All of a sudden, you can have 24/7 construction sites. A laborer robot building a building nonstop. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm thinking a little too beyond, but in my mind, something like that, if that's ever feasible, that's really going to shake things up,
that's really cool. That's an interesting use case for it. Honestly, that I like the idea of that a lot. Just like save on safety.
right?
Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of benefits to that for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think the next decade, and it's going to be interesting. Or even if they're able to bring in AI more into self-driving cars, and I know it's already there, but
Mhm.
one thing I think about with, my car is, it has lane assist and steer assist, and you can put on the cruise control and it'll, basically I can like the car will just drive itself and I'll take my hands out the wheel and it just yells at me to put my hands back on, even though they don't need to be there. But when it's winter, in cold Calgary and there's snow on the ground and you can't see the lines of the road where the signs are covered, I think that's where AI and driving will become really impactful when it can start to understand, you know, the environment and changes in the environment, and knowing the road's a bit more slippery, and oh, I can't see the lines, but I've got to figure out how to drive this car anyway, and start to think more like a human would make these decisions. So that'll be interesting as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I haven't looked in that space for a while, but I think overcoming like weather challenges is the next
Mm.
frontier in more cars. That will open up the space for us to like reduce accidents and be able to like be a lot easier for folks to drive. That would
Yeah,
be amazing.
totally. And I honestly, I'm just talking up my ass, Rita. I have no idea if this stuff is even happening. I'm just thinking about
I'm going to
myself.
say you know everything.
When I ask, yes, that's it. Yeah, I'm just I'm thinking about myself when I'm driving and it's snowy roads, and I'm like, can I just let my car do this yet? No, okay. Guess I've got to be white knuckled on the road myself right now. Yeah, yeah,
I love it.
yeah. So okay, we had a great conversation so far, and there's a bunch of other questions that I feel like we've touched on already, which is great. Um, we talked a lot about the working remote versus in office, versus the hybrid approach, which I think we really hit home. I it sounds like the remote with some off sites is kind of the the North Star, I think, of what we were talking about that seemed to work. Anything else on that topic you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a long held debate on the internet of like, should folks come in? Should they not? All that. I mean, I think that twofold. One, any requirement for folks to come in mandatory in office will most drastically and like negatively impact women
Oh,
as
good point.
most frequently primary caregivers. I think about this a lot with requirements like for return to office that off either women have had children during COVID, have found a new way to raise their children, have found a dynamic they had to that worked for their families, and that this mandatory return to work will most dramatically impact the way that they work. Um, I hope that there will be studies on this in the sense so that we know the data behind it. But I just think, like, even anecdotally talking to friends who have children, it's a huge stressor for them because before it allowed them to be able to work from home and be close to school and, all the things that we know
So
for
many
benefit.
benefits. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, that's one that I'm sure it's being considered, but I don't know to the degree. We have a spiral of like if there's not enough women in leadership, or is their voice actually being said at the table when these
Mm-hmm.
decisions are made? You could go on about that, but so that's one part that I think is important, and then the other is just more broadly. I genuinely think it just depends on the person.
Mm.
I live close to my office. I can go in. I like going in. Um, but I know that's not the same for everyone. And I feel like sometimes folks are like, you have to go in, or I saw something on LinkedIn this morning that was like, working from home is way better, don't you see? And I'm like, I think it truly depends on the person. And
100%.
that preference, if given the opportunity, is like the thing that will actually lead to the most productivity when you feel like you have autonomy and choice. And this isn't like grade school anymore where you're asked to if you can go to the washroom. Like the ability to have choice over
Yes.
your own life is something that obviously will become something people will care about when they're looking for a new role.
That's such a good point. All of those are great points. And I got the gears turning for me too. I think yeah, having that autonomy is huge. You know, I love working from home, but I'm also very social. So you know, I remember when I had a job working from home years ago, probably almost 10 years ago now, I couldn't do it because I just felt so isolated. Whereas now I have, you know, my two dogs. We have great neighbors, so sometimes go grab a coffee with some other neighbors who work from home. We have a very active social life on weekends, so it kind of helps me stay, like, you know, fight off that isolation feeling or like being on an island, which is great. So it works for me now, but it didn't work for me 9 years ago, right? And it might not work for me in the future because I don't have any kids right now. But if I had like three kids running around, I might be like, I need to get to the office today, right? Because I know some people
Yeah,
that have like
exactly.
they love their kids and they want to be with them, but like there's an occasional day where they're like, it's too hectic here today. I'm going into the office because then I can actually focus in on a few things, right? Or whatever the
Totally.
case might be. So I think that's a great point about that, yeah, having that autonomy. And, you know, it's like, I want to be at home this week with my dogs, or if someone who has children, like, yes, this is a week with my kids and I'm going to work from home, get my stuff done, but spend time with my kids. Or maybe it's like, I've got a deadline. Like I'm going into the office today because I need to be like laser focused for 8 hours straight kind of
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I totally agree. It's like days with lots of meetings, I choose to work from home. It's a lot easier to take them at home. But
Right.
the ability to choose that is the benefit of it. But mandatory return to work, I feel like, will push people out of the workforce.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, when I think mandatory, I'm like, there's two things that come to mind. One is like, I think maybe some downtown city cores are feeling the
Yeah,
economic pain of, you know, people moving to the suburbs or moving to cheaper cities. And some of the
of course.
downtown cores might be struggling. But then the other side of the coin for me is I just picture the manager walking around with his coffee and being like, yes, asses in seats, I can see you. Productivity,
Exactly.
capitalism, shareholder profit maximization, you know. So I think like I've seen so many videos of companies where like that's the case, where they have these leaked videos of CEOs and, you know, all hands meetings going like, you got to get back to the office because like, yes, productivity seems to be doing fine, but like it could be better. It could be
Yeah, I
better,
think that
you
all
know.
comes down to like lease agreements, like building ownership, a lot of those pieces. And I totally agree. Like
Totally.
downtown cores being impacted by those things is not something to like. It's another good data point for reasons
Mhm.
to go either way. But it just reminded me of like the line between blue collar and white collar work is just so less distinct now than it was like
Absolutely.
40 years ago, because a lot of that is the same mentality of like punch in, punch out, which
Hmm.
has benefits when we're looking for like concrete productivity. But in like SaaS space and tech space, there's many levers to be pushed and pulled for how you succeed as a company. And by pulling on like or pushing on just that one, I feel like it will have an inverse effect than if you're building out like trinkets where you
Yes,
know these exact steps to build the trinkets.
totally. Yeah.
I feel like there's this like it gave me vibes of punching in and punching out, and I feel like that's not the way that tech succeeds in particular.
No, it's a good call. I will say, I can tell you I had one job, and this is a marketing job, where I had a punch card.
Oh gosh.
I lasted 2 weeks. Yeah. I
Yeah,
was
no,
like,
that doesn't work. Yeah,
not doing it. Yeah.
no,
Couldn't do it.
I
Yeah.
couldn't see that.
Um,
That
um,
needs some sort of like autonomy.
oh, absolutely. And one more point on that, that I was reading an article on LinkedIn the other day that I found pretty interesting, that they were making the point of, if companies truly say that they're, you know, green focused and environmentally focused, they should allow employees to work from home, because I don't know the exact number, but the amount of emissions that were not spewed into the atmosphere during the height of the pandemic and work from home was like drastically lower because so many less people were commuting 3 hours a day to the office. So I thought that was interesting as well.
That's an interesting point as well. the
Yeah.
sustainability element.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
there's a lot
obviously
of
travel was impacted,
right.
but like
Yeah.
just day to day as well.
Yeah.
That's so
Actually, those are
interesting.
some of my favorite memes in the pandemic where, it's like, oh, because no one's driving anymore and, humans aren't polluting as much. The dolphins are coming back to, the Venice
I
water
remember
channels
that
and stuff.
story.
But they're actually really funny ones too that were just completely off the wall. Like, oh, because humans aren't polluting so much anymore, the smog is clearing from the atmosphere, and you can actually see Atlas holding up the Earth, and have a meme of Atlas, like totally outrageous. But I
Oh
love
my God,
memes.
that's
Yeah,
hilarious.
memes and meme culture keeps me going.
Oh,
Um,
I love the meme people.
oh, yeah, they're so good. Um, okay, I think that's a really good conversation around the work from home and hybrid scenarios. It's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, I think. But
Yeah.
generally, yeah, having autonomy. I mean, I love working from home. I don't think I could ever go back to a full-time in office situation. Hybrid, absolutely. Not that'd be great. But yeah, the remote and that autonomy and having that ability is nice, especially when living in Calgary, where like in the winter the sun doesn't come up till like 8 a.m., in the really
Yeah.
dark months. It's
Yeah.
like I don't want to be getting up when the stars are still out and like commuting to work. I want to wake up when
No,
the sun's coming up. Yeah. It's
I know.
yeah,
I know
right.
any broad sweeping like global policy needs to make sure that you've lived in Calgary and can know that experience.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, the summers are great because the sun's out till like 11 p.m. But in like this December, January, it's like, whew, yeah,
For like 5 hours of sunlight.
right. Exactly. It's
Ugh.
quite drastic. Yeah. And we're taking meetings at like 8 a.m. and it's the stars are still out and it's super dark and people are like, what's going on? Where I'm like, Calgary. Yeah. Anyway.
That's wild. I always
Yeah.
forget it's like that there.
Yeah, December's not too bad because you have Christmas lights and it's festive. And then all of a sudden the reality hits of January because on one side, everyone takes down the bright lights. So all the festivities just gone. And then you get your Christmas credit card bill at the same time. And you're just like, oh, cool. It's dark,
Everything
sad,
is dark.
and I'm broke. Yeah. Cool.
Oh,
Cool.
that's the
Yeah.
greatest. Love it.
Yeah, I know, right?
Great times.
Yeah, January. Anyway, there's still a little ways away. Still I gotta get that out of my head for now. Um, Next up, what books or podcasts? What are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you listening to?
So I've become a big audiobook person,
Same.
and I've almost exclusively like stopped listening to podcasts. I listen to audiobooks on Libby, big push
Oh,
for
nice.
the library app. And right
Yep.
now I'm listening to, well, let's pull it up. I just started today a book about the Vanderbilts. I think it's
Oh, that's
literally,
interesting.
yeah, it's called Vanderbilt, and it's by Anderson Cooper, um, and Catherine Howe. I wanted to make sure I knew the second author's name.
Mm.
Anyways, it's about their legacy, but from more of like an individual perspective. So less on the like how they lost all of their money, but more on the day-to-day experience. I'm about 7% in, so I'll let you know how it goes. But
Yeah.
I found audio. I never listened to any nonfiction, even like business self-help books. I found it really difficult to read physically
Yeah.
because they're just like next, next, next. But on audio, that it's a lot easier. I found I've listened to probably like 50% nonfiction this year
Oh, wow.
because I've been able to listen to it. So that has been a huge win. I was listening to like no, I was fiction only and reading, but now I'm nonfiction.
Nice. I'm the same way. Audio is a much easier
So
way for me
yeah.
to digest. Yeah.
But podcast, so there's this movie podcast called I Saw What You Did, and
Oh,
it's two
okay.
women, Millie and Danielle. One of them is previously one of the programmers for Turner Classic Movies,
Oh,
TCM.
cool.
And they basically do like they pick a theme and they choose two movies each week and then they talk about them from the theme. So, and they're like funky themes. They're not like
Mm.
scary movies. They're like really funny movies or funny themes. Like they did a whole series on hot during summer. So like movies that had the title or words hot in the title. Anyways, I really recommend that. They crack me up. That's
Yeah.
like basically the only podcast I listen to now.
Yeah. I love that. I used to be in a huge. I used to listen to like 2 or 3 podcasts a day, and yeah, I've been kind of maybe because it's summertime and it's nice and I'm out and about more, but I haven't been listening to as many podcasts as I once did a few months back, but I have actually picked up a physical book for the first time in a while, and it's Alex Trebek. It's his autobiography that he wrote while he was sick before he died. Not to go back to the our heroes
Yeah.
dying conversation, but I'm just started it the other day, not too far in. I'm a very slow reader. I read a few chapters and then get distracted by something, but so far so good. It's a cool book. My wife and I watch Jeopardy uh, as often as we can, and I love it. So to see like his book and read through it is pretty neat. And it's interesting to see that like he was always people told him his throughout his whole career of like, oh, you got to write a book or talk about your life and your autobiography. And he was always like, no, I don't think I'm that interesting. I just don't want to do it. But then when it was kind of like his and when he was nearing the end, he was like, oh,
Yeah.
fine, I guess I'll do it. And even in the book, you can kind of see when he's writing it, he's just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm writing this book because, this is it, I guess, but maybe you'll find something in here. I don't know. Here it is. Just read it. So I
Oh,
really enjoy the way it's kind of laid out in his life story so far. So I'm looking forward to getting through that.
oh, that's great. So I'm thinking like, firstly, I also love Jeopardy. I've become really into it in the last year and a half or so,
Right?
where
So good.
I wasn't watching it before, but then I've been really into it. And so I should definitely pick that up because I would love that. And there's separately, I have to look it up and I can look it up later for you. There's a Jeopardy podcast. It might literally be called like The True
Oh,
Telling of Jeopardy History.
cool.
Um, and I've listened to a couple episodes of that on like longer drives because it is for us Jeopardy nerds where you care about how the story and the show was
Right.
formed.
Yeah,
And there is a full
absolutely.
episode on Alex, which is like cool. It's kind
Yeah.
of a bit of a background of how he got into the show.
That's good to know because I like, yeah, not to get too nerdy, but I feel like I've already exposed my nerd side between this and the last off the cuff episode. But there's like books that people have written about. Like there was a Jeopardy contestant from the '80s who literally wrote the book on the Jeopardy buzzer, and it's
Yes,
like,
okay, that guy is on the
is
podcast.
he? Yeah, and yeah,
The like buzzer technique, like you're better off holding it with both hands. Like there's this
yes,
whole
and like
thing.
you have your hand like down to the side because like
Yes,
your reflexes are quicker there with your thumb, and like
yes, yes,
because
yes, yes.
yeah, because like that's why like James Holzhauer like went on such a tear because like not only is he got like a photographic memory and has like amazing recall, but he like read this book and he knows all the stats and he's a gambler and like he broke the daily double because he did all the research on like the percentage of the daily doubles and where they show up on the board and what day of the week they show up there and it's just like that's why he broke the
I
game.
know.
Yeah, it's
He's
incredible.
like, I haven't watched Jeopardy Masters to the end, so don't spoil.
I
Uh,
won't. Yeah.
but he's so good. Like I know he thinks he's the villain, but I'm like, he's actually like, I don't think him and Ken should ever go up against each other. I don't.
I know. Yeah, they're it's a lot of fun. I won't spoil Jeopardy Masters, but I love everybody on it and it's fun when you get in those types of tournament shows where they're like just kind of like poking fun at each other and it's like all in
Yeah.
jest and there's the Torontonian there, Matea
Yeah.
Roche.
Yes, Matea.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
fantastic.
good.
Yeah.
So good.
So I really
Honestly,
been enjoying that.
I sometimes have thought like would I see Matea out on the street? So
Oh
I'm
yeah?
like,
What?
I would hope.
Oh,
This
I
is
thought you
like
said you
fingers.
did. I'm like, no way. That'd be
No, no,
amazing.
sorry. These are my goals. I'm like, I mean, I have thought about this before. I haven't seen many like celebrities, but I feel like Matea is a celebrity where I'd be like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, Jeopardy's fun. And I also like that they called it like the Alex Trebek stage and it's like the Alex Trebek
yeah,
trophy for the Masters tournament. So it's cool.
yeah.
Yeah, and
So nice.
reading through this book that now of Trebek. I don't know, there's something about Jeopardy. It's like obviously it's fun, it's quiz. It's like I'm really bad at it, but I still love watching it. If I get like three right in a show, I'm like, yes, this was great. You know,
Yeah.
but I still love watching it and but it's just very I don't know, everyone's so chill and everyone's very kind. And when you go in like the Jeopardy Masters, it's all for charity. Like there's just something really wholesome about Jeopardy as well, I feel. And like it's a place for people to go, it doesn't matter of like, what your background is, what your pronouns are. It's just like a place that everyone can go and just like be smart and talk about cool stuff. Like it's
Yeah,
a
I totally
cool
agree. I
show.
feel like it allows for people that have put in the work to like try to be on the show, but there's
Yes.
just this connection of like knowledge that brings people together. I really like it, and I love the stories of people that have watched with their family. I mean, you'd hear some of the podcasts like watch their family for decades, and like, oh, it's just a family thing that has fully connected people, even if they're. I'm the same way. I get like 3, 4 questions right, and then I'm like, oh, I could go on this. Like I could do it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah,
Whereas I'm like, oh, this
that's
is.
right.
But I think that's a lot of people that watch so much. You're like, okay, yeah, I could do this, and
Right?
that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. Yeah, there's definitely sometimes I'll watch the show and they'll be like in like one of the rounds it'll be, you know, pop culture, music, and geography, which are like through my three strongest kind of, quiz categories. And then I'll get like, 50% of the questions right. And I'm like, oh yeah, I just got to read that How to Buzz In book and I'm ready to go.
Meanwhile, they do like Greek mythology, and I'm like, okay, cool. My least
Yeah.
favorite.
American history. Oh, good.
Yes,
Or like
yes.
U.S. presidents. I'm like, fuck, I know like
U.S.
three.
presidents is just brutal.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
always just I always just go with like I think I did my go-to is just like Obama every time.
See, I think I'd be more of like a Lincoln. I'm like,
Oh
one of
yeah.
these like 5 has got to be Lincoln.
Yeah, or like FDR. That was the
Yes,
president,
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, so I guess we're okay. We're starting a Jeopardy podcast as well, by the way,
I would love
apparently.
that
Yeah.
Jeopardy reaction podcast. The
Yes,
best.
yes, the Jeopardy reaction podcast. It's happening. So we've been chatting for a while now. It's great. Almost like over an hour. So I want to
Oh
make sure
yeah.
I'm respecting your time. And I feel like all the questions we talked about in the pre-show we've covered. But last couple questions here that we can close the show out with. You know, what's next for you career-wise? I mean, you're at Google, like you're there, like you're at this awesome company. It's like someplace you said earlier that you didn't think you'd ever be. Like, what's next for Rita?
Yeah. I mean, who can tell? But no, I think
Could be anything.
yeah, truly, the world is my oyster. No,
That's
I
right.
want to stay at Google for the next couple of years for sure. I mean, if they'll have me, I want to be able to work at a large company and kind of experience like the ins and outs, particularly like governance structure, like how you
Mm,
get done, how things get over the finish line, like how to actually work with others in such a large org. And I kind of like started my career in security adjacent, went to product marketing, and now I'm using both those skill sets in my current role. So I'm kind of at this
awesome.
precipice of like I can either go deeper into security or go work in um, like either security software or in within a security org, or I can go back to product marketing and do something similar but in a product marketing function.
Mm,
And I thought that I'd be able to more clearly see that within the first year of joining Google. And to be honest, I'm still exploring like what that path looks like. Almost like a not no to this, like no to that, no to that. Like there's going to be a yes in here somewhere. And I'm
right.
really enjoying the work that I'm doing. It's just that there's part when I think about like the next position, like, okay, I know the no's. So I have to figure out what the yes is. But I do think that security will be that place. I, for a long time, thought it would be privacy, but I think that it probably focus more on the security side. um, I'm increasingly liking like the opportunities that security and AI provide. So
Totally.
I'm hoping that that will be something. Um, it's a bit of a vague answer, but like I really am trying to treat it as exploration more than nailing something down. I thought like the first 10 or so years of my career I would treat as exploring and then decide, okay, where do I want to go up more? So I'm still kind of in that phase.
I love that. And I don't think it's vague at all because I love that answer because for me, I feel the same way where it's like I think about maybe our parents' generation, and it's like you get this, here's your job, this is it. You work it, you build up your RSPs or your 401k and you retire. And that's great. That works great. That worked great for them. But there's something exciting for me. And I know this isn't everyone, but I feel like, our generation to a more degree is like, oh, maybe I can go anywhere, especially with these remote opportunities. And it's like, I don't know where my career is going to go from today to next year to 5 years from now, from 10 years to now, like who knows? And there's something kind of exciting in that for me anyway, where it's like, yeah, like I know kind of what I want to do and the skills I want to get. And of course, there's these, these companies where it's like, yeah, there's certain companies or certain opportunities where it's like, do you want to work here? Be like, absolutely. Yeah, I'll work here for the next 30 years and like die here if you want me to.
Yes,
But
yes,
for the but for the most part, it's like, it's kind of fun to be like, oh, I can go here and here's some skills I learned at this place and I can move up internally, or maybe I can go over here, go there, and it's fun. I think it's fun.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
There's this cookbook by there's a movie called what's it like, Mr. and Mrs. Miller.
Heard of this.
And there's a man that's in that movie. I'm probably this is a big a big segue and a big off the cuff.
Perfect. That's the name of the show.
Robert Altman is the director, and and I think it is called
Ah,
McCabe and Mrs. Miller. I knew it
yeah,
wasn't.
I just Googled it. Yeah. McCabe and
Yes,
Mrs.
McCabe
Miller.
and Mrs. Miller. And there's a person that is like a really good actor in that movie. And I had never seen him before. And so I was in this Wikipedia hole. And this actor, like long story short, has basically done like dozens of jobs. He was an actor. This was like later in his life, but he had also been a chef for celebrities. He was at one point a musician. He was like a scientist. I mean, the list goes on and on. And he basically created this cookbook which was all of his recipes for what he had cooked when he was working with celebrities.
That's
But
amazing.
and that's how like I kind of came across this on a Wikipedia hole. But I feel like now that is the direction where I'm trying to explore my career. Like, okay, you can do multiple things within tech, but like, what would I even want to do if I didn't do something in tech? Like, would I want to always joke like design garbage cans? Like, would I want to go be
That's
like a house builder, construction, like working construction site management? Like, I'm genuinely thinking about this more from the perspective of like these next few years for exploration within tech, but then also out because this man is an inspiration. He did dozens of careers in his life and lived this full, huge life. Like
that's so
that is
cool.
something I would like to replicate.
Yeah, I love that. And you joke about building garbage cans, but I actually saw a video the other day on Instagram of a guy who like cleaned there's a public beach and he went with like this big rake and he raked up all of the like old aluminum cans that were kind of buried underneath the sand over like, months and months of people walking over them, melted down all the aluminum and built like a really custom garbage can and then put it back in the beach where he found all the stuff so that people could recycle within
Oh
it.
my gosh, I love that so much. That would
I'll send
probably
it
be
to you. Yeah, I'll find it.
content.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
so cool. I'll
that's
find the
really
video
cool.
and it's popped up a few times on my feed and I'll send it to you because I was like, that's neat. And as soon as you said like a joke about it, I'm like, no, but like this guy did it, you know?
Yeah, that's
He's
really
designing
cool.
garbage cans and like
Yeah, he did it.
yeah,
That's so cool.
yeah,
That's an inspiration.
totally. Yeah, that's great. Last thing, any advice for our listeners? And again, I don't know who our listeners are. I think we had like 50 views in the first episode, so I was happy with that.
Nice.
But I
I
kind of
love
joked with Ricardo that, the current listeners are my two greyhounds. So, I mean, any
it.
any advice for our potential
I'll take
listeners? Yeah.
greyhounds. Ask for more biscuits from
Oh,
Jamie.
yes, I know I'm getting low. I need to get some more treats. They know. They know.
I love it. I mean, I think personally, it's a bit of advice, a bit of something I've taken from being in product marketing to something that's more adjacent now is that like the ability to tell stories and to be able to use your central messaging in a way that helps you deliver on what you want to achieve is core, like regardless of what role you're in.
Mm,
I feel like storytelling and product marketing is kind of the bread and butter of what we do, but that skill set has had so much like execution and replicability, if
nice
that's a
word.
word.
Yeah, it is now if it isn't.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it isn't, right? I've been able to replicate that in like so much of the work that I've done in the last year of not being core in product
Mm,
marketing. And so I think if any advice I could give product marketers that are either thinking of shifting into something that's not product marketing or thinking about how to translate that skill set, like know the ability to tell those stories is something that is truly unique that oftentimes we maybe don't think about as much
mm.
outside of the actual products we're marketing, but it is something that is a transferable skill that's really served me well so far. So I'm glad to have learned it.
Love that. Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that because for me it's I've only ever been in marketing, but like especially in product marketing, I'm noticing that as I meet colleagues in this realm, most of product marketers didn't come, at least in and this is my own little, bubble of experience. So I don't know what the broader spectrum is, but didn't come from a marketing background, a lot engineering background, developer background, product management background, and kind of just like with that knowledge and expertise, kind of became that product marketer and then learned the marketing as they got into it. So I think that's a really good point. And now I'm like, maybe I can do the opposite. Maybe I can take my 10 years of marketing and slide into a PM role or something. I don't know. You got
100%.
me excited, Rita. I've got the world is the
There
oyster.
is a big world out there. I know. I mean, I think that the PM skills translate so well to PMMs, and you see so many people do it.
Yeah,
I feel like
totally.
there is that
Yeah,
transferability for sure.
absolutely. Cool.
Yeah,
Well, that was it. I mean, that was it. I say it an hour and a half later. There's been a great conversation.
just
So
a quick
yeah,
follow.
yeah. Just a quick hello. Um, thank you for joining me on Off the Cuff, and really appreciate your time. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
All right. Talk to you soon, Rita. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.